Your Walmart feels different lately. You can't point at one thing. There's no announcement, no memo taped to the door. But the sense arrives the moment you step inside. It might be a delay that made no sense, or a total at the register that ran higher than your gut expected, or a product you've tossed in your cart for years, suddenly not where it lives. And here's the odd bit. Nearly everyone notices. Hardly anyone can name it. That naming is our job today. Together. I sat down and took this apart, slowly. What's moving inside the country's biggest store chain, the reasons underneath it, and what it costs the millions who push a cart through those doors each week. This isn't a rough patch. It's a rebuild. A quiet one. Trace the design, and every little irritation snaps into place. I didn't come to yell at anyone. I came to walk you through the wiring. Steady. Evidence in hand. We'll begin where the heat is highest. A sealed plastic box. A button promising someone will come. And a shopper stuck beside it, list in hand, watching something that used to be easy dissolve. Ride with me. And that box is only the entrance. The thing behind it runs deeper. Stay to the end and the full machine comes into view. Meet a grandmother. Her list holds one line. Formula for the baby her daughter carried home last month. That brand hasn't changed in ages. Neither has the shelf it sits on. She could walk there half asleep. She heads for the spot and halts. The can is right there, plain sight. But a pane of clear plastic stands between her and it. A little button waits on the frame. Push it and help supposedly arrives. She pushes. 60 seconds tick off, then more. She jabs the button a second time. Another 3 minutes bleed away. At last, a worker jogs over, key in hand. Do the math, and it's past 7 minutes. 7. For a can of baby formula. It never once moved from its spot, and arm's reach away the whole time. She held no grudge against the employee. She understood. The poor kid was likely running the floor solo. The part that lodged in her chest was quieter. The one thing her grandchild needed, sitting locked and no path to it. That specific ache is going viral in real life. Look at what's under lock now. Razors, cough syrup, deodorant, makeup. The dull little staples families have grabbed freely for generations. All caged. Everyone demands a pause, a key, and a staffer who might be nowhere close. The cause is legitimate. I'll grant that up front. Stealing from stores has ballooned into a genuine crisis right across the trade. Compact goods. Pricey. Simple to pocket. Simple to flip. So the cabinet locks make sense. They cut the losses. But no fix comes free. And this bill lands on the exact wrong lap. The shopper who broke no rule. Take the parent who ducks in for razors before a dawn shift. Or the grandmother who crossed town for one can. Neither lifted a thing. Yet both are handed the sentence written for a thief they've never met. Let that settle. It's the wire threaded through this entire story. You obeyed. You're covering the tab for those who didn't. There's the burn. Not the cheap item locked away. The message the lock sends. It quietly says your honesty is no longer the default. It says you're a maybe, now. I combed through hundreds of real shopper comments before I wrote a word. The same note surfaced over and over. People swearing off any store that brands them a suspect before they've cleared the entrance. Call it fragile if you want. It isn't. It's a level reaction to being reclassified, silently, as a hazard. And this is where it sours into something uglier. You stand inside one of the most wired retail machines humanity has built. Endless dollars of technology humming past your ears. Sensors. Code. Lenses in every corner. And you still can't lift a $2 item without a button and a prayer. Tilt your head up while you stand there. The camera count has climbed. Over by the makeup. By the doors. Hanging above the self-checkout banks. Inside the renovated stores, that gear reads behavior. It flags staff quicker than any pair of eyes could. Efficient, sure. Less merchandise slips out. But plant yourself at that locked box beneath those lenses. The glass and the cameras hum. One shared note. This place got redrawn. Not around your errand. Around danger. Somewhere in that redraw, you quit being the guest. You turned in to the threat under watch. One comment I read still rattles around my head. A guy said the sight of caged goods sparks no thought about theft inside the walls. It flips his mind to the parking lot, to whether his car survives the trip, to whether he makes it home clean. That's the lock's true output. It doesn't merely stall a purchase. It rewrites how safe you feel just standing in an aisle. And it does it to the honest many. To catch the rare thief. Now for a change that moves slower. The kind you'd miss on any single run. The brands are thinning out. Never in one blow. That's the sleight of hand. Something you rely on drops a shelf slot or two. Come back a season later, and a couple more are gone. Then one afternoon you're parked in your usual spot and the whole row feels wrong. Your brand survives. Barely. Banished to the low shelf. The dead corner, a pair of lonely jars. In the prime real estate, the belt line where eyes land now belongs to someone else. Great value. Better goods. House labels fanning out down every aisle. Take a woman who's reached for the same pasta sauce across 15 years. One jar. One habit. She rounds the corner to her spot. The sauce clings on, technically. 2 jars, low and cornered. Everything beside them is the store's own line now. Redesigned. Bearing no resemblance to the bargain label she pictured from a decade back. Here's the sharp move. The company didn't merely pile on more of its own goods. It re-engineered how they look. Crisp packaging. Contemporary. Tuned to read as upscale. A few shoppers swear it could pass for a specialty grocer's shelf, not some budget throwaway down at ankle height, which begs one plain question. The house label once competed on price and price alone. Now it's costumed to look premium. So, where did the price land? Across certain aisles, it edged north of where the cheap pick used to sit. The distance between it and the name brands narrowed. And here and there, the name brand surrendered its slot. A company-owned version moved in at nearly the same tag. The reasoning is bulletproof. Move another firm's brand and the company pockets a cut. Move its own, and it holds the entire chain. The making, the pricing, the placement, the margin at each link. Its label is plainly worth more to it than yours will ever be. None of that arithmetic reaches you. You just see options. And for plenty of veterans of this store, those options keep narrowing, even while the box itself keeps swelling. That's the trick of scale. You cross into a store you could land a plane inside and your brain assumes abundance. The sheer size whispers it. Peer closer though. A rising share of what lines those shelves loops back to one origin. The company, wrapped in fresh boxes, tagged at fresh prices, staged to nudge you toward whichever cut feeds it best. This used to be a bazaar, every brand on earth clawing for your dollar, and you crowning the winner. That was the arrangement. The entire idea. It's mutating into something else. A ring where the company sets the rules of the bout and steps into the ring as a fighter too. Let me be even-handed. Some folks flat out prefer the new house lines. Others shrug at the swap. A prettier box breaks no law. Still, a chorus of longtime shoppers handed me one recurring tale. The item they'd leaned on for years simply evaporated. No notice. No heads up. There one week, absent the next, and the replacement wasn't always the better buy. It was the more lucrative one. One person cut to it. They don't want their picks pre-made for them. They want to pick. And the company, shelf by shelf, keeps quietly picking on their behalf. That's wire number 2. The first hold things off behind glass. This one lifts them in broad daylight. And it bets you won't clock it until the label you trust in has already slipped away. Usually you don't. Not until you're squinting at 2 jars where a full row live. Now the shift you literally cannot spot. Because it lives on no shelf. It lives beneath the whole floor. Artificial intelligence runs through this company as we speak. at a depth that would floor most shoppers. Not in your basket, in the bones of the place, in the systems, in nearly every gear turning from the first customer to the last. Take stock levels. A single big box location can stock north of 100,000 distinct products, sometimes running toward 150,000. Riding herd on all of it, spotting what's thin, predicting the next sellout, plugging a hole before the shelf empties. That once demanded crews poring over numbers each shift, calling it live. The software owns most of that now. It monitors inventory without a break. It cuts reorders on its own. It forecasts demand off weather, off a local ball game, off a hiccup in the supply chain. Judgment that 8 hours from a human now closes in seconds. The correction fires before anyone on the floor could sense a problem brewing. The building itself wised up too. Inside the renovated locations, a camera catches a puddle or a jammed aisle almost as it forms. It pins the location, labels the trouble, rings the closest worker. A spill that would have lingered 20 minutes gets mopped into. And honestly, a slice of this genuinely helps you. Fuller shelves, quicker cleanups. I won't pretend it's all loss. But here comes the line. Nobody says it full volume. Every chore that got automated was a chore a person once owned. Mining the stock. Nudging prices. Reading demand. Catching hazards. Those weren't ghost processes drifting in a database. They were livelihoods, belonging to flesh and blood people. With shifts and wages, and a decade of gut sense about how their store's own regulars really shopped. The place hums along better now, on nearly every metric you could chart. It just hums along with fewer humans calling any shot on the floor. And behind each efficiency win crouches a question with no clean reply. That worker who used to handle it, where'd they go? Most shoppers never chew on it. They clock the stocked shelves. The spotless four. What slips past them is where the thinking migrated. It didn't vanish. It relocated. Out of the folks pacing the aisles. Into servers whirring in data centers a long way from the store you're standing in. That lands heavier than it sounds. Floor knowledge was human. It flexed. The clerk who knew your store cold, who clocked the regulars, who knew which aisle pooled water in a downpour. That person adjusted in ways no program can fake. Now the store's brain sits in a data center, and it reasons about the average. Not about you. One veteran shopper dropped a point that stuck to me. Every one of those humming rigs feeds on electricity. Staggering piles of it. So the cost of powering all that cleverage has to land somewhere. Where does it land? On the very receipt in his hand. I can't validate his precise figures. Nobody hands you that ledger. But the instinct beneath the claim holds. At heart, the store is turning more mechanical than it's ever been. Leaner, sharper, more automated. And barely a soul registers it mid-shift. That's wire number 3. Glass sees things by muscle. House labels erase them by blueprint. This one lifts something softer. A human who once stood between you and the machine. Gone. One task at a time. Now the change everyone spots on contact. And almost nobody can quite explain why it gnaws at them so hard. The register. For nearly all of retail's run, the setup was obvious. Both sides knew the script. You wheeled your haul to a lane. A clerk ran it across the scanner, sacked it, took your cash. Out you went. Simple trade. Step into the store today, and that trade got turned inside out. Go park yourself by the self-checkout bank in a newer location. A lone worker. 6 or 7 kiosks firing at once. A row of customers, each ringing up their own haul, sacking their own bags, wrestling their own error screens, flagging for rescue when a kiosk seizes. Which it does, more than it ought to. And the handoff doesn't end at the lane. A guy walks in hunting running shoes in his size. Nobody mans the shoe wall. The rack won't tell him what's actually back there. Out comes the phone. He opens the app, punches in the exact model, reads the aisle the app spits back, then finds his size cleaned out at this store. All of that while planted in the footwear section. Handling what a clerk would have knocked out in half a minute a few short years back. That's no oddity anymore. That's an ordinary Tuesday. Chasing a markdown? The app. Curious whether the next town store has one in stock? App. Hoping to redeem a coupon? App. Trying to pin down one item on a floor that runs hundreds of thousands of square feet? And not a soul on staff anywhere near? App. One more time. And listen, the software works. That's not my beef. For folks at ease with a screen, plenty of it earns its keep. Some genuinely like it. Fair enough. My point cuts simpler. Shoppers now shoulder a real and swelling share of what employees once carried. Scanning, sacking, checking prices, checking stock, digging up coupons, locating the product. So here's the honest ask. Did 1 ounce of that offloaded work circle back to you? Are the prices any lower because you're doing more of the lifting? Is the bill any lighter? Ask a room full of people straight and the reply lands the same. No, nothing dropped when the waiver slid onto their shoulders. The company banked the work. The customer banked nothing. That distance is exactly where the resentment pours through. The chores got dumped on you and the savings never showed. There's a bit circling the comment threads that lands it perfectly. People joke the company cracked the code on drafting its own customers as unpaid crew. And it's tough to swing back at that. You ring the goods. You sack the food. You untangle the glitches. You chase the stock on your own phone. And when it's all done, guess who still forks over the cash? One shopper put it flat. So where's my check? She wanted to know, if I'm the cashier now. Another framed it his own way. He feels like hired help these days. Minus a single benefit. Eyeballed like a crook the whole visit. Doing the store's chores for free. While a lens judges whether the way his handcuffs an item looks shady. Read that twice. It's the entire wire folded into a breath. You supply the labor. You get surveilled supplying it. And you pay for the honor. There are honest reasons stacked behind every piece of this. Retail at this scale is a beast. Wages cost a fortune. I followed the spreadsheet. But from the vantage of someone who shopped here a quarter century, something core has shifted. Not just the paint and the lighting. Who sweats the work, and who walks off with the payoff. The chores drifted onto you. The reward drifted the opposite way, and nobody paused to ask if you signed off. It just crept in. One kiosk, then another. One app feature, then the next, until the shopping you were raised on became a gig where you're the crew, and you never once filled out the form. Now the shift that rattles people deepest. Once the coin drops, as far back as most of us can recall, a price was a nailed-down fact. A paper slip on the shelf told you the number. That number held firm, until a human strolled over toward the old slip and pressed a fresh one down. Solid, trustworthy. One glance locked it in your head and you carried it to the lane dead certain. That whole setup is fading out. Store after store is trading in those slips for electronic shelf labels. Tiny digital panels flashing each item's number. And a control room flips them, from afar. Near enough to instant. No printing, no peeling. No worker roaming the aisles with a pricing gun. The gain is real, and I'll name it plainly. A price swing that once ate hours of legwork across a whole store now deploys in minutes. Mismatched slips shrink toward nothing. A sale can flick on at the exact right second and flick off just as tidy. But something creeps in alongside that ease. And for a stretch of shoppers, it's the part that steals their sleep. Picture a woman who drove out because the app dangled a kitchen gadget cheaper than any place else. She tracks it down. She reads the little panel on the shelf edge. The figure sits above what the app swore. She grabs it anyway. Scans her slip at the exit. They ring her at the shelf number. Not the app number. No fraud in it. Almost surely no deliberate hand either. Just a system wearing too many faces. The app. The website. The shelf panel. The register. None of them sent in the single instant she stood there. But the residue that moment left wasn't really about the couple of dollars. It was about a thing that used to feel like bedrock. A price was a vow. The shelf number pledge. This is your total at the lane. That was the handshake. The floor of the whole exchange stood on. For a growing slice of shoppers, that certainty has evaporated. I heard this on loop from actual people. One described the shelf panel and the register flat out disagreeing, then getting told, when he flagged it, that he'd misread the panel. He'd worked retail himself. He knew he hadn't, and he raised the question that ought to spook the company. If it snags me, who's catching it and who isn't? Here's the layer beneath. Those digital panels unlock a power the company isn't wielding yet. Not on the everyday stuff most carts hold. They make dynamic pricing doable. Numbers that swing live. Off the clock. Off the stock count. Off local hunger for it. Off arrivals tag. Off whatever data flows in. I want to nail this precisely because it counts. The company is not running that on your weekly groceries. Say that cleanly and fairly, full stop. But the capacity now sits wired into more and more of these buildings. And for a heap of people, merely knowing the gear exists seeds a fresh doubt. A low background hum of a question. Will the figure I'm reading right now match the figure I pay? Paper never bred that doubt. It couldn't. It sat frozen. A panel can move. And the second you grasp that it can, your footing tilts. Even if it never has. Even with no plan on any desk to run it. The slip used to close the matter before it opened. Now, for a swelling crowd of shoppers, it cracks the matter open. I've watched the counter move people are cooking up. They snap a photo of the shelf panel before they hit the lane. Then they cross-check every shot against every scan. One line at a time. Customers building a case file, mid-store, purely to shield themselves from the price. That's not a shopping trip anymore. That's a compliance audit. Now the shift that explains the logic beneath all the rest. Because it recolors everything. The company is remixing who the store gets billed for. Across most of its run, its bread and butter shopper was easy to sketch. Somebody making a paycheck stretch. Somebody who never craved soft light or style displays or a boutique mood. They wanted their money to reach further. Dependably. Week in, week out. The entire store got framed around that shopper. And it climbed to the biggest chain on the planet. By serving them with a focus few could touch. Decade after decade. But the ground beneath shifted. And not gently. Groceries cost more than they did 3 or 4 years back. Power bills crept up. Housing rocketed in most markets. Insurance premiums kept climbing. That squeeze on household budgets started climbing the ladder. It reached families who, a few years back, had slack to spare. The kind who shop somewhere fancier without blinking. Those families are giving it a second thought now. Loads of them started turning up at the store fresh, or drifting back after years away. And the company watched that flow arrive in its data. As it happened, here's the call it made. Rather than swallow these newcomers into the store as it stood, it chose to bend toward them. The renovations sweeping hundreds of stores are that choice made physical. Brighter light. Meteor displays. Sharper signs. A space engineered to shed the warehouse skin for something you'd actually pick. The house label makeover follows the identical logic. Less stripped down. More styled. The better goods line reaches further still. Aimed openly at a shopper who weighs more than the smallest number on the tag. Purely as business. This is shrewd. Widen your base while gripping the crowd you've got. That's the exact play a sharp company runs, right when the door cracks open. But a real strain hides inside that play. And longtime customers sense it. Even when the words won't come for what they're catching. The traits that made the place feel like theirs. The bluntness. The plain, unfrilled honesty. The quiet gut sense that every call ran through one filter. Does this genuinely help a shopper trying to make payday reach the weekend? A share of that is getting buffed away. To court a different face, the store hasn't dumped its original crowd. Prices still hold competitive down most aisles. The value is still real in a real sense. But the company no longer draws the blueprint for them alone. For the very people who made it what it became. And that shift, veterans clock. Even when it only surfaces in the lighting. or the box art, or the way a shelf gets carved up. Not always in words, but they feel it crossing the threshold, and they feel it wheeling back out. One older shopper called the whole place cold now. Industrial. Uninviting. Said he barely darkens the door, and that word cold keeps resurfacing. From people who spent decades certain the store had their back. The lighting glows warmer than ever, and somehow the place reads colder. No accident there. That's the fallout of a store drawing itself for a different face. Not the one standing in the aisle. Now here's the wire that knots every strand together. The price of the ordinary stuff, not the headline items. Everybody already clocks that a television runs steeper than it used to. A big appliance too. You brace for it. You research it. You make a slow, weighed decision. The change biting hardest lies somewhere else entirely. It lives in the aisles you walk on autopilot. The box of crackers. The bag of chips. The bottle of dish soap. The pack of paper towels. The stuff that lands in the cart while your mind's elsewhere. The same items you grabbed here for years without ever glancing at the tag, because you figured you knew the number cold. Except that's not true anymore, because every one of them crept upward. 60 cents on one thing, $1 on the next, $1.25 on the one after. Solo, none of it lands. You catch it for a heartbeat and roll on. Not worth a scene. But here's the arithmetic that eventually runs you down. Picture a standard run. 25 everyday items. The usual weekly load. Say each one climbed just $1 over a year ago. That's $25 bled out. Straight from the budget. Week after week. Same cart to the eye. Same list. Same errand start to finish. The total tells another tale? And people feel this keener here than almost anywhere, because of everything this store was supposed to stand for. This was never just one option among many. This was where you went when a household budget actually had to close. The store where cheap wasn't a weekend stunt. It was the whole vow. Stitched into the brand. Baked into every move the company made. So the crackers climb, and the soap climbs. The towels, the chips, the cereal all inch up a notch. And the frustration boiling up isn't really about the coins. It's about what those coins were meant to stand for. About what shopping here was supposed to spare you from sweating. Nobody storms the exit in a fury. That's not the shape of it. People walk out running silent sums in their skulls, chasing where $30 or $40 extra slipped off this month, against what the same month cost a year prior. Same cart. Same errand. Thinner wallet. That distance runs between how the trip looks and what it actually rings. It's the fault line where trust starts to crumble, bit by bit, one slip at a time. And I caught those slips straight from real people. One said a thing he'd bought for years just kept marching up. He figured once inflation cooled, the price might cool too. A handful did. Nearly all the rest kept marching. Even now. Another said a cheap staple had roughly doubled. When money tightened, folks leaned on the budget goods to scrape by. And the budget goods got dearer too. On the company's own label, no less. I can't verify every personal figure, and I won't fake it. But I don't have to. The shape repeats in every message. The cart held steady. The bill didn't. And this is the beat where all the strands cinch tight. The glass slowed your stride. The house labels boxed in your choices. The machines swapped out the humans. The self-checkout drafted you into shifts. The digital panels shook your faith in the number on the shelf. And beneath the whole thing, quietly, the cost of the plain stuff climbed. The very store you drove to because it was supposed to be cheap. There's the wound. Not that the company got pricey. That it got pricey here, of all places. In the one aisle you quit checking ages ago because you trusted it blind. You quit checking. That was the flip. And nobody flagged that the floor had tilted while your eyes were elsewhere. So back up. Take the whole board at once. Caged goods dumping the hassle on honest shoppers. Trusted brands losing their turf to the company's own. Software swapping in for the people who used to make the floor calls. Customers soaking up labor that once belonged to staff. Digital panels seeding doubt where paper never could. A store pivoting toward a wider, glossier crowd. And everyday tags creeping up on the very items most people quit tracking. Each one carries a rational story. Each got done for a real reason. And no lone piece standing by itself would tip you into rethinking where you shop. But they aren't standing by themselves. They're firing at once. In the same buildings. On the same people. Piling up week over week, run over run. And what they force together is something the earnings calls never capture. The company is more advanced than at any stretch in its history. The systems pack real power. The inventory reads razor precise. The camera grid runs complete. On nearly every measure, this is a keener operation than it was 10 years back. And still, for a rising count of longtime customers, the store feels harder to stand inside. More policed. Less human. More like an engine tuned for something. Less like a place raised for them. More tech. Less familiarity. More floor space. Fewer brands they've leaned on. More efficiency behind the curtain. More grit in the trip itself. That's no contradiction. It's the plain result when a company optimizes for scale, and margin, and a broader crowd, all at the same clip. The bare, no-costume feel of a store that simply functioned gets sanded down, in the name of something glossier and fatter on profit. Let me be square about one thing. The company isn't hurting. It's still the biggest chain on the planet. These moves come from a place of muscle, and a good number of them will likely leave the business stronger for years. But a brand is more than a bottom line. It's a feeling. And it's the expectation you haul in before the doors part. It's the trust laid down over years of the same reliable trip. A grandmother waits 7 minutes on formula parked 2 feet behind glass. A shopper scans a code just to learn a jacket's price. A couple in their 60s can't turn up the cereal they bought for 20 years. A family gets home to a slip $40 heavier for what looks like the identical cart. Each moment reads small. Each makes sense on its own. What they total, spread across millions, is a lot to shrug off. And here's where I'll break from the standard advice. Every clip like this signs off the same way. Just quit shopping there. Flop with your wallet. For a chunk of you, that lands. 3 stores inside a few miles? Walk. Not a soul's holding you. But that advice leans on something untrue for millions. It leans on you having a choice. I read note after note from folks in small towns who don't. 1 store for the whole place. Maybe a second. And that second runs way steeper on the identical goods when it even stocks them. The company already buried the shops that used to fight it. The hardware store. The corner grocer. Shuttered. Years gone. So somebody tells a person in that town to just shop elsewhere. They're pointing at a door that was never cut in the wall. That's the piece these talks skip clean over. The frustration isn't only that the store changed. It's that for a vast crowd, there's nowhere left to carry it. You can be furious and pinned in the very same breath. And that's the real story humming under the glass and the cameras in the panels. You did nothing wrong. You worked. You kept to the rules. You showed up week after week and handed this place your budget and your family's list. The store shifted around you. Not because you fell short. Because a company judged its tomorrow ought to look nothing like its yesterday. So the real question isn't whether the place is still cheap. It's this. Is it still in your corner? The honest answer hinges on when you first walked in. First timer this year? You'll meet a cleaner, smarter store than you braced for. Been coming weekly for 30 years? You're watching a place that felt like home morph into something you're still decoding. Both are true. Both unfold under one roof. At the very same hour. The story shifting. The heading is playing. One question still hangs. The people who built this place into what it is, are they still the ones it's rising for? So I'll hand it to you. Does your store still feel like the one you knew? Or have you caught it too, quietly turning into something else?